Back again. Here we go. Today this time talking about MDAs and GDDs. MDAs standing for mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Mechanics are what we use to describe the particular component of the game at the level of data representation and algorithm. It's basically the start of the game when you're going to just when you're creating the ideas for it and everything for it. So you're going to need the code, the different algorithms that you're going to use within the game, the basically character code, map development, level design, all the aspects of game creation that you need when developing a full-scale game. Dynamics is what we describe as the runtime behavior of the mechanics acting on player inputs and each other's outputs over time. This is where this is going to be based on the controller inputs that the player uses when playing the game, or any inputs made when interacting with said game while it is running, and then any issues or any undesired responses get corrected. Aesthetics we view as the desirable emotional responses evoked in the player when he or she interacts with the game system, when he, she, and all others interact with the game system itself. So when they fully play the game, get into the state of flow when playing this game, how they respond to the game, how they feel when playing the game, whether the scene intended to invoke sadness in the player actually does or invokes joy, happiness, pure thrill, or the very undesired response that you did expect from the player. Now we go on to the MDA framework. We're going to start with, above mechanics would be the rule sets, would be the rule sets that you put in place for the game, how the game is supposed to function around these rule sets. Then we move on to dynamics, which is the system, how it functions, how everything goes together, if everything goes together properly, if everything turns out well. Then you have the aesthetics, which is how it looks. Does it look enjoyable to play? Does it look aesthetically pleasing to the player? Does it look like one of those games you can pick up, look at it, and straight away be like, I want to play this game? And then we can view it as designers starting from M going to A, because designers have to start from M. They're creating the game, the rule sets, how the game's supposed to function, how everything's supposed to function. And aesthetics is basically the last thing that they're going to work on, whilst the player ideally looks at aesthetics and works their way to the mechanics side of it, because that's the last thing they're going to focus on, how the game functions on such a fine level, whilst their first thing they're going to see is how the game looks. Does it look enjoyable to play? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Is it one of those games that I will just straight up jump into because it looked nice? Pretty sure I've been fooled by that about once or twice. Like The Crew, driving all across America, just having such an idea implemented into a game was enough to sell me, because I had to drive across an entirety of America. It doesn't need to be fully detailed. It was a large enough map that I could just drive across for hours on end. Aesthetics first. Dynamics, it functioned well. It did. It actually did function pretty well when you get down to it. Still locked behind a paywall of PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live. Well, that's an issue in itself. Another issue in itself. Then you have the mechanics, the rule sets behind the game, how everything works together, how everything functions together. Still linked to dynamics at the same time. And then on the image on the right here is just another representation of MDAs from the game designer aspect and the player aspect. Now we move on to gameplay aesthetics. This focuses on words such as sensation, fantasy, narrative, challenge, fellowship, discovery, expression, and submission. Sensation being playing a game as a sense of pleasure, that you enjoy playing games and everything that makes a game, you enjoy that. Narrative. Well, no, sorry. Fantasy. You're playing a game as make believe, like Final Fantasy. Very good game. But you're playing a game as make believe, as fantasy to escape the real world or to just escape everything else. Narrative. Playing the game as drama. You're following the game's. You're following how the game story goes, how everything functions together. Like an example would be It Takes Two. Though that requires cooperative play, you follow the story of two parents who are pretty much going through divorce. Their child wishes they weren't, so they get turned into puppets, have to work together, and have to follow the entire storyline, which is a very interesting storyline, by the way. But you follow the storyline and play through the entire game, where they form another bond. They basically come back together, where the relationship was broken at the start. At the end of the game, it's been mended because they came together to work. They worked together, and in the end, ended up coming back together. And it was their child that asked for it, but she basically had no input throughout the game. Now we have challenge. Playing the game is an obstacle course. These people would be the Dark Soul players. You're playing the game because it's challenging. You enjoy it. You wanted a difficult game to play. You wanted to sit down and get your brain working. You wanted to sit down and get the blood pumping. You really wanted to sit there and put yourself through hell because it was going to be fun. Fellowship would be game as a social framework. Playing games to work with others. That would be gameplay aesthetics. That would be what everyone would pick up a game to do. You pick up FIFA to play with friends or to play career mode, depending on the type of player you are, but there's still a social framework towards it. Next, we have discovery, which is game as uncharted territory. You're playing new games that you've never played before in different genres because it seems interesting to you, and you want to broaden your knowledge, broaden your gaming knowledge, broaden your gaming Bible. Call it that, broadening your gaming Bible. You want to be able to play various different games, and therefore you can have an opinion on so many different genres. Now we have expression, which is game of self-discovery. You're playing different games to find out what you like, express your emotions, express your feelings in all different ways, in all various forms. Now we have submission, which is gaming as a pastime. You're sitting down playing games because you're just bored, you're trying to figure out something to do, and gaming just seems it. Which is basically covered under gameplay aesthetics. Next, we have GDDs. These are games design documents, and these are used when developing a game and the creative aspects around it. Everything that makes a game comes from that. You document all the design ideas or more information on how the game is supposed to go in this one document, how this game's supposed to function. Ideally, you start with the introduction, which is just explaining the overall idea of this game and what you want to achieve from it. Then you go on to the concept ideas. These are all the ideas around this game that people have had, that your team has had, and you've noted them all down. And then from there, you create an idea. You create your overall concept idea of what you want this game to become. Then you function on the storyline, because you can't have a game without there being a story. Otherwise, you're just creating a sandbox where people can do whatever they want, and there's no direction to the game. You're just creating a game for the purpose of creating a game. Next, we have game structure. How the game's supposed to flow, the structure around it, how it's supposed to be organized, how it's supposed to go together, putting the story together pretty much, and all the scenes throughout it, how players are supposed to be able to go through this game properly. Next, we go on to players. This can be viewed in two different ways. You have the players, who are the characters that the actual players are going to interact with, or you have the people who will be playing your game, the customers, the people that you're designing the game for. You have to take their viewpoints into perspective when developing this game. And that leads on to objective, what you hope to achieve when playing this game, when developing this game, the overall outcome of this game, and everything else. Next, graphics, how it's supposed to look, visually visually appealing to people? Is it supposed to look like a low poly game, a high detailed graphics game, or did you just want a simple indie game with a decent storyline that players can just jump in whenever they feel like it and then just continue on? Next, you have the target system, similar to the players, but the target system would be, who are you targeting? What individuals are you targeting? What age range are you targeting? Who is this supposed to be marketed for? Next, we have gameplay. The gameplay overall is just how it's supposed to look, how it's supposed to function when the player has the controls in their hand. After that, you select the controls that you want the player to use. Say they're going to use a controller. What's going to be mapped to button A, or what's going to be mapped to button B, Y, X. No, I'm referencing the Xbox controller because it's in front of me. I do also have a PlayStation, but that was the first thing that came to mind. What's gonna be assigned to RB, RT? What's gonna be assigned to all of those buttons? Then you also have to decide, is this gonna be a PC game? Therefore, what keyboard controls are gonna be assigned here? Then you take tools, and you take tools that you're gonna use when designing this game, what you're going to use when creating this game and developing this game. And once that is decided, you get your team that will be working on this game, and you take the team, give them the resources needed, give them the idea, give them the GDD, just give them the game design document, and then they will ask questions where needed, but they will be able to develop the game for you. Now, an example of a games design document, well, this is my own games design document. There are better ones out there. There are various better ones out there, but here is my own. So we're going to take one mechanic here, and then with this mechanic, I just created a mini GDD around it. Well, not really a GDD, but I took information, took one mechanic from a game, and then explained this mechanic. This is not being viewed properly, and that's annoying. But here we go. So we take the rewind mechanic in Forza Horizon 5. The rewind mechanic, it allows players to freeze their position in the game and go back to a previous place within that game. And this rewind is only for a couple seconds, but it allows players to make mistakes and then go back and correct that mistake. Say they didn't brake hard enough. Say they didn't brake at all. Say you've hit something, crashed or whatever. You can go back and stop that from happening, and then you can go on from there. This feature is available by pressing the Y button on the Xbox controller, and then you just go back. It goes back in small increments, but you can only go back so far. And the thing with the rewind mechanic is it's useful, and it teaches you how to drive in the game properly. It teaches you how to get the rewind timing correct, which is extremely difficult because it rewinds in, I think it's like segments of 3 seconds, 4 seconds each time. So you don't get any in-betweens. You stop at that 4-second increment, and then you go from there and make any corrections there. And it doesn't rewind just by holding Y. You just have to tap Y once. It rewinds 4 seconds or 3 seconds, however long it is, and you basically figure it out from there. And then you must work on your timings to get it right, or you just learn from your mistakes. And you also have the option to cancel the rewind if needed. And then at the bottom here, we have a small little diagram of what the rewind is basically like. You pause your spot. You basically pause, the game pauses itself for you and takes you back a couple places, but as if it logs a history of what you just did. So you basically go back in time. You go back in time, technically speaking, and then you get to redo your mistake from there. But overall, that was GDDs and MDAs. At this again, and I will see you in the next video.